Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. And in this video is for all the people currently looking for a software developer job. The point of this video one is to give you lots of useful, actionable advice in succeeding in that search. And two, to help basically manage your expectations. Because I think a lot of people kind of expect that, hey, I'm going to train to be a software developer, and they're going to find a job sort of like within a month or two of being trained in whatever capacity they trained in. Okay, one, there are jobs as a software developer, but all job searches, especially when you're new to an industry, do take some time. Okay, but no matter how good your training is, it's just the reality of how job markets work. There isn't sort of a perfect way to sort of match people up with places where they are needed and where they can be of most value. It's just the way it is. But it's totally worth it. I can tell you from my own personal experience as someone who changed from one career to another, it was one of the best decisions I ever made. Okay, my quality of life, my work-life balance, pretty much everything I could have ever wanted, the amount that I enjoy my work, all of it is to a point that I would have never expected. Okay, beyond my wildest expectations of my ability to enjoy and actually my life at home and work, my ability to enjoy my work, and the income ain't bad either. Okay, so it's totally worth it and totally doable. Okay, again, not everyone's going to end up going down the same path. There's going to be a lot of different entry points, and we'll talk more about that later on in this video. So do stick around and watch this whole thing. Trust me, there's going to be a lot of useful tidbits if you stick through this. But first I want to do is kind of go through my story, just so that way you kind of like know where I'm coming from, so that way I'm just not some guy in a box talking to you. My name is Alex Merced. A little bit about my history is I did one of the things to keep things in perspective, like my story, like I wasn't necessarily like fresh into programming. Like during, when I was in middle school, I had some interest in working with like HTML and CSS in its very early like stages, and would build like little like Dragon Ball Z fan sites and like e-wrestling fan sites, like like early days like fantasy baseball type stuff. Really basic, really ugly like GeoCity sites, stuff like that. But I had some exposure to it. And I also really enjoyed a piece of software by the name of RPG Maker. That had like its own little sub community, which there you didn't necessarily write code, but you did, in creating a game, you would use switches, which were like Boolean variables. You would use conditionals, which are like if statements. So a lot of those programming concepts I got exposure to at a very young age. So basically, I did kind of come into this with some pre-exposure to thinking in that sort of way. Same thing with like music production. I did some music production for a while, and there you automate a lot of like special effects and whatnot. So that got me thinking on like, okay, when this happens, do this, repeat this, that kind of thinking, and thinking of things in sort of coinciding layers and whatnot. And I was a computer science major for one semester until I changed. I became a popular culture studies major and have a bachelor's degree in popular culture studies, and ended up working a decade in finance, training people in finance. Okay, that was my job for like 10 years. I trained people in finance, and it was awesome. I loved it. It was great. And I got to train people through online courses, live courses, and it was very similar to the job now that I train people with General Assembly, training people to become programmers. I was training people to become like entry level like brokers and assistants and whatnot in the financial industry. But that kind of kept me in New York. Also, the demand for it kind of dropped over time. It just wasn't, and sort of my love for it did kind of fade away after some time. So I decided that I wanted to make a switch so that way I could leave New York, have a better work-life balance, because I was working crazy hours. Talking about like 80, 90 plus hours a week. Okay, and I was being paid salary, so like whether I worked less or more, I was the work had to be done. So it was taking its toll on me at that point. So I decided to make the switch, and I started learning how to. First, I started teaching myself Python, because I just didn't really. I kept hearing people talk about Python, so I said, "Oh, okay, I'll learn this." And I did things like the Solo Learn mobile app, which is really cool. It's definitely worth like the $30-50 for a year subscription to toy around with that. Really helped build some familiarity with terminologies and basic patterns. early on and very quickly. But again, the problem is that like I was learning a lot of stuff and starting to kind of piece things together, but I was kind of like learning things all sorts of out of order. So like certain things like didn't make quite sense because it was like sort of foundational things I didn't understand. It was just like, and then plus I had no idea how do you turn this into a career. Okay, so and this is always like the challenge with the self-learning approach. That's one possible way, but I needed some more guidance. At this point in my life, I wasn't going to go back to 4 years of school. Okay, nor did I want to like borrow the money to go another couple $100,000 in debt to go get another degree. That was off the table. So boot camps was a wonderful idea. Okay, I could definitely afford surviving a few months without an income. I could definitely, do that, and I'm more than glad to put in the work. And it worked out that like my boot camp wasn't for like 2 months from when I registered because of just timing with like my phase out from my job and things like that. And basically what happened was I spent those 2 months just like learning as much as I could. Not necessarily like the things I probably should have focused my time on. It was very focusing on like Python and Django, even though like I had like really no JavaScript skills at that point. Um, but it allowed me to kind of just like have some awareness of things. So then when I got to the course, I was in a good spot that I was able to keep up with the course really well and really get a lot out of it. And having sort of a career coach to kind of guide me along the way was really, really like that was like alone like worth the cost. Just like kind of have that guidance and that sort of clarity of vision of how do I approach this, which is why I'm a huge evangelist of boot camps. Okay. Yes, if you have a 4-year degree or a master's degree in computer science, okay, that is certainly a ticket. Okay, you don't have to do a boot camp. You can teach yourself, but again, you have to ask yourself: do you have the discipline to be consistent in practice? Do you have a clear roadmap of what you need to study in what order to get where you're going? Because those are two things that, if you can't give me a strong yes, they're going to be huge roadblocks in you getting where you're going. And a boot camp helps give you that clear, sort of that clear path, that clear journey of where you're going, and on top of it gives you sort of like, and also a clear path of how to switch careers, and also kind of forces you to be disciplined because you have people there holding you accountable. You have, you have your classmates, you have your instructors, etc. But again, you're not going necessarily like 6 figures in debt. So it's a phenomenal option. There's great financing options. I haven't been to every boot camp. I only went to General Assembly, so I can only speak very, very highly of my experience at General Assembly. But there's a lot of software developers being hired all over the place. So the point is, whatever path, fine. But that's my story, and hopefully that gives you some perspective on sort of where I'm coming from as I give you this advice. Okay, so basically, let's start off by just talking about like when should you expect? Because first thing you have to do to become a software developer is get software development skills. Okay, time to develop skills. Okay. So basically, here's the way I would put it. If you get a computer science degree, you're gonna generally have the knowledge after the 4 years of schooling. But there's a decent chance that during your 4 years, I think this is starting probably to improve as the job market has evolved. But a lot of times you didn't get any exposure to Git during your undergrad degree. Sometimes you didn't get exposure to a lot of different technologies that are actually very big staples in the workforce. So you might know Java in and out. You might know how to do things in Prolog for some reason. But you probably still have to spend maybe like another 3-6 months of having to like learn things like Bash and a lot of web technologies, which oftentimes isn't the focus of computer science programs, etc. Okay. And I'll come back to why like web is so important nowadays. So you're talking about 4 years for the degree, and then probably still you're talking about like another 3 to 6 months learning of some of the things that you need sort of on the job, the kind of things that like a boot camp will focus on, probably the things you would probably focus on as a self-taught. Okay, if you go for a boot camp, okay, and actually as a boot camp instructor, there's a lot of times where a lot of my students are computer science graduates going to sort of learn that gap from their undergrad, in the sense that they know a lot, like, and they excel in the class, but there's just certain pieces, like they never did JavaScript, they never did Git and things like that, so they still want to go to the boot camp to kind of backfill that. In a boot camp, you're talking about 3 to 6 months. Okay, honestly, my estimation is that bottom line, you need 6 months to be at a certain skill level. Also, generally, like if you study 3 months before your cohort, then chances are by the end of your cohort, you're gonna sort of be in that sort of like I'm ready to start work level. If you started learning code at the beginning of your cohort, then chances are like it's gonna be like another 3 months after your cohort's over before your skill level is gonna be at the level you want it to be to find the kind of job you probably are thinking you want. Okay, there are still like a lot of entry level positions that you can get even before then, but like everyone kind of is targeting that sort of junior dev role. But that's not the only role out there. We'll talk about that. There are other sort of entry points if you realize that like these skills and this knowledge really opens your door up to a wide variety of roles in a wide variety of industries. And that's going to be a key point to really help you find what you're looking for. But this is sort of like my expectation just on attaining the skills. And then if you're like self-taught, okay, it's going to be 6 months to a year, okay, before you're probably your skill level is going to be at the point for that like junior dev job, depending on how disciplined you are and how clear of a road path you have for yourself and how much time you're putting in. I would say any way you cut it, like you're probably looking at let me think about how many hours I would think of work. So let's see here. Let's do the math. So let's say 6 months, 40 hours a week. So 6 months times 4. So 6 times 4, that's going to be 24. 24 times, let me just get a calculator. Calculator. Okay. And that's another myth. You don't need to be super good at math. I'm not bad at math. I was in the math league in my high school, but what's important in programming, which lends to yourself being good at math, is sort of spatial thinking, just being able to sort of imagine things abstractly. And that's something you can learn and something you build up over time. But being able to kind of like imagine like fake things interacting with each other. But 6 times, okay, 6 months times 4 weeks per month times 40 hours per week equals, so you're talking about a 960 hours of basically education and coding. There's of coding information to get you to like entry level. Because again, generally, like if you ever read anything, I think it's like Malcolm Gladwell, who talks about like it takes about 10,000 hours to be good at anything or to be like a master or something. Okay, so essentially you have to be like 10% of the way there. And this is probably true for literally anything. Okay, so 10,000 hours to master. Okay, trust me, if you keep spending more hours and hours, you're going to get better. Okay, but probably I would say I think that's a safe number to go with. And usually during a boot camp, you're going to get about 500 hours during the boot camp's actual like coursework. I don't think that counts the time that you spend independently. So coming out of a boot camp, you're probably around the 600-700 hour mark. So you still have to backfill like another 200 hours. Okay, so just so you can understand sort of like the investment in the skills. So that's first off, you gotta know the stuff. Okay, and it doesn't mean you have to know every word and have it like memorized, but the idea is like you have to get to a point where you can talk about it. Even if you don't know every word, don't know what every word means, but you have to like be aware of things and feel confident in yourself. And that's just going to come from repetitively doing things and building things. So that's sort of the piece. And then there's like the actual job search. So what should you expect about actually doing the job search? So in LinkedIn, I did this like solicitation saying, hey, people who've graduated from a boot camp, sort of like how long did it take you after your boot camp to get a job? Again, I'm an outlier because I told you my life experience. So I had a role lined up before my cohort was like literally like on graduation day, like the day before I accepted 2 job offers. I was used to working like 80-90 hours a week, so I was fine with working 2 jobs. And I really kind of wanted to build up that, since I had the opportunity to build up the experience, I did not mind working around the clock to build up that initial experience. So yeah, but again, not typical. But I mean, again, here we have Jamie, who was one of my students. He also got hired before his cohort was over, like the cohort I was teaching. An interesting story about him is because he had a background in English, so he was able to leverage that to get a job as a technical writer at IBM, as you can see here. So again, it's not just once you have these skills, this knowledge of programming, you can take skills that you already have and leverage them into positions where there's a synergy between those sets of skills. Okay, and so now he gets to learn about databases all day and write documentation about IBM products, which is really cool. Okay, but when you look through like the responses, and I'll put a link to this particular post in the video description, but you see like numbers like 11 months, 5 weeks, 10 months, 8 months, 7 months. I think there's another couple 7 months. Okay, 4 months, 3 to 4 months. So you see there, like it's not like those first 3. The very few people actually find a role within those first 3 months. Reason is oftentimes your first couple interviews, you're shaky. You're not comfortable talking about code because while you were learning, you were oftentimes listening about code and not talking about code. So your ability to articulate what you know, even if you know it, is not necessarily there yet. So after several interviews, you get better, you get more confident, and things like that. So, okay. And I know we spent a long time just on this part of setting expectations, but setting expectations is important because if you expect too much too quick, you'll get disappointed. If you expect too little too soon, okay, then what's going to happen is that you're not going to put in the same level of effort because you're going to think, well, it's down the line. Okay, so I want to set the expectation that, hey, it's going to happen for you, but you still got to put in the work right now. Like that's the right expectation. Like that's the right sweet spot. Okay, so what can you do? This is, again, I'm speaking from the perspective that you finish your boot camp. Now what do you do? Okay, of course, the biggest thing that I can say you can do is brand yourself. Make people aware of you. Okay, this is one of the things that I'm like super obsessed with, making sure that people are aware, like now that I'm a software developer, that other software developers know that I exist. Okay, and and then not only that I exist, but I am of value to them. And how do I do that? By creating pieces of content that is of value to other software developers. Okay, and how have I done that? Mainly through dev.to. I'm not saying you have to go build a whole website, but I've built several YouTube videos on the things that I have learned and taught myself and learned during bootcamp. Okay, I've created like cheat sheets, blog tutorials. Okay, all these pieces, they get shared. They build awareness. Okay, also I have a podcast and all sorts of stuff. And I recommend you do the same thing because there's several benefits. It doesn't matter whether you're the next big YouTuber or the next big podcaster. But by regularly producing content, it forces you to think more critically about code. Every time you do a podcast, and here's the thing, you don't need to do a podcast on like the cutting edge thing. If you do a podcast on just the basics of HTML, there's people who need to hear that. Because a lot of other podcasts are covering more advanced things. And people would appreciate a discussion of just basic stuff. And yeah, maybe people have recorded episodes, but oftentimes when people are looking at their podcast list, they're looking only at the new episodes. So they still need someone doing a current episode about the basics. Okay, same thing with blogging. Okay, technology is constantly changing. Okay, so intro to HTML, how DevTools is explained in a blog about how to use, to introduce yourself to HTML, CSS, JavaScript may not necessarily be as useful as one you can write now, where tools that didn't exist even a year ago now exist. Okay, like Chrome DevTools is constantly changing. Firefox's DevTools are constantly changing. So there's going to be tips that you can provide that older articles couldn't have. So in that case, I really big on technical blogging, and dev.to is the place to do it. Now what I do, okay, this is like my strategy, is that I post on my own blog. So I have like this blog, which is a Gatsby blog, which could be done in any static site generator. So like if you learned Vue, and you're really good with Vue, then use Nux or Gridsome. If you are React and very Reacty like I am, you can use Gatsby or Next to create your blog. Or if you know Svelte, or there's SvelteKit, and if you know Angular, there's Scully. And if you know all of the above, there's Astro. And actually, I really like Astro. It just came out. It's a really awesome static site generator. Highly recommend looking into it. I do have some videos on it. But the reason you want a static site blog is one, you can set it up where you can write it in Markdown, and this one is going to force you to write Markdown very regularly, which is also going to just make your ability to write documentation better. Okay, which is also a good skill that's going to help make you more hireable. When you write the articles, when you write a blog article, so like what I do is I'll learn something. So like for example, recently I was learning a lot about Alpine and HTMX, which are these two new front-end technologies. They're actually really cool. Highly recommend reading the article. Um, but by writing the article, it forces me to ask questions that I wouldn't have asked about the content, and also get much more familiar with the terminology so I can communicate it. So now that I've written it and kind of tangled myself with that knowledge, I know it better, but I've created a piece that will brand me better. I can now share that article. People will share and people will become aware. When I send out a job application, there's a link to my blog and they can see, hey, look, he wrote all these cool pieces on all these technologies. He really knows stuff and can explain it. Because I can open up the door to sometimes non-coding jobs. Things like sales engineer and developer advocate. So for example, at Google, there's developer advocate jobs where their job is to promote the frameworks and the code and the technology. So these are the people, when you watch like Google I/O videos and Google podcasts, they're the people they're talking about the newest like changes in the framework and whatnot, because these are people who are good at communicating. So they're focusing on communicating the code while the developers actually write the code. But the thing is that they wouldn't be able to communicate it if they didn't know code. Okay, so you need people who are very knowledgeable about coding, who can code, but their job is to communicate. Same thing with a sales engineer. Okay, because at most products, you have the engineers, oftentimes not the best people at selling the thing, because they get too bogged down in the details. And then you have the salespeople who oftentimes really don't know much about the technicals of the product, but they're much better at talking to the client. You need someone in between who can kind of communicate between the needs of the sales team, meaning answering customer questions and concerns, and communicating to the engineers in a way that the engineers understand how to address those concerns. And this is what's called a sales engineer. That's another position that's out there. Okay, so your ability to communicate opens up those doors. And again, there was technical writer, as you saw earlier, with my former student, Jamie. Okay, cool. So these, and then also even at like sort of more entry-ish level, like there's things like email developers where you're basically using like HTML and CSS to create really like nice looking emails. Those are great like entry level roles. Or you can go like spend some time learning WordPress. Like WordPress is totally a legit field. Learning some of the Shopify technologies to work as a Shopify developer. Those would probably get you jobs at like different agencies. But the idea is you gotta learn stuff. Okay. There's also an article here on my blog on branding I highly recommend reading. Okay, unfortunately, like I don't have a search feature on my blog, so you can just use the built-in Control F and search using your browser, and you can see like here, building your coder developer brand. I will link that in the video description. Okay, but this kind of goes over a lot of the things I'm going to be talking about in this video, like how to make use of LinkedIn, GitHub, blogging, Stack Overflow, podcasts, etc. So again, write blogs on dev.to. If you want to do a podcast, a really easy way to do a podcast, like literally you can record a podcast on your phone and have it on iTunes, Spotify, without having to do like knowing how any of that works. You just use anchor.fm. It's free. Okay, it's free. And you can even monetize your podcast for free. There is no reason why everyone shouldn't have a podcast. Again, it doesn't matter if you have a big audience or not. It doesn't matter if you get one listen per episode. The more you do it, the better you communicate. I've been doing videos and content in different fields for a long time. And the biggest benefit from it is that it's allowed me to get better at talking, and talking with like energy and passion. And that's going to come across during an interview. Because if you can talk to the interviewer and seem very excited about what you're talking about, they're going to want to hire you. Okay? If you come off like you have a bad attitude, that you feel like things aren't going your way quick enough or things aren't being handed to you fast enough, that's actually going to have the opposite effect during interviews and have the opposite effect. So also when you're like posting on LinkedIn, social media, you want to have that positivity, demonstrate that positivity and passion. Okay? Traits like pessimism, cynicism, whatnot, don't translate well in getting other people to sit there and want to have you on their team. Okay? So I'm not saying fake it, you have to develop it. You got to find your passion for this, and you will find your home. Bottom line. And there's so much different technologies, so many different possibilities in this space, and you can do it in every industry. So if you're passionate about something, like you're passionate about, or if you have previous experience, like whatever your previous career was, if you're changing careers, it wasn't a particular sector. Like if you were passionate about that, and now you're in coding, mix the two together. Okay. Cool. So, but again, this article goes here. Coding challenges, and again, a good way to improve your skills is by doing coding challenges. Like that's something I've been trying to do more of. So what I do actually is I maintain a daily code practice repo. So I'll do challenges on like codewars.com, Elite Code, HackerRank. But every time I solve a challenge, I copy the solution to a folder for that language here. So you can see I try to practice a lot of languages. There's always a debate of whether you should learn a lot of languages or just focus on one. My general advice to you is going to probably just focus on one language. Maybe focus on, if you're in JavaScript, focus on like one front-end framework and, one stack at first. I have a weird need to learn everything. Maybe not the best habit, but that's just how I work. But yeah, so you see here, like I dabble in like everything. Also, it's because I like to teach, so I learn everything so I can teach it. But basically, like over here, JavaScript. So every time I do a challenge, I'll copy that into a file in this repo, and then I can see the link. Let me go to, these are data structures. Let me go to code challenges. See, I have a link to the code challenge that I did, and then here's like the solution to that code challenge. The beauty of this is I can easily go back and find the work that I did, and people can look at the work that I did, so I can show this to someone during an interview. I have a link to it on my resume, so they can see that I do regular practice, and I learn a lot doing it. But on top of it, it gets me a commit. Because another thing that potential employers will look at is they're going to look at your GitHub heat map. Okay, and you want this thing to be as green as possible. Like, see, like here, the only 2 weeks where I really kind of lacked on commits were the 2 weeks between me moving from Brooklyn, New York, here to Winter Park, Florida. Okay, but aside from that, like I'm coding every day, and like if I don't have much time, I'll just write a function. I'll do something in my daily code practice repo, even if it's just like doing a quick stack or queue or something in a different language, something I can do in like 20 minutes. Okay, just to have the commit. Okay, so that way every day I try to make at least one commit. Okay, in something. Nowadays I have so many, like I have clients that who I do a lot of development for, and I'm using GitHub in that process, and a lot of little personal projects that I'm doing, that it's really not, after it gets to a point where it's not really hard to make that commit. But again, good ways of doing it, and that's another reason why it's good to have the Markdown blog, because every time you write a Markdown file and you have to commit your repos to update your blog, that's also a commit. Okay, so by basically keeping those that daily code practice repo, and by having a Markdown blog, you're going to be upping your commits. So I have my blog there, so that way it's on MySpace. Like, I mean, not on MySpace, the old web social network, but in a space that's mine, like my blog. But all those posts are also on dev.to. And then they're also on Medium, because there's the Medium's partnership program, and if some people see them on Medium, I earn a few cents, and maybe I get like $5-6 a month of extra revenue from posting the same blog that I posted on dev.to and my own blog on Medium. Okay, same thing with Anchor. You might be able to make a few pennies a month from people who listen to your podcast. And then if your YouTube videos, like now I've gotten to the point where my YouTube videos are getting some sprinkles of monetization. Not, again, it's not really like a thing, like a buck we're talking about, but it doesn't hurt. Like I don't mind, like, hey, I can supersize. Okay, not that that's a thing anymore. But yeah, okay, so Anchor.fm for podcasting. I recommend, again, building your own Markdown-based blog using a static site generator. There are plenty of templates. Just look up Markdown blog template. I actually, okay, if you go to npmjs.com, okay, I actually created a library for this. Create Markdown blog. Okay, literally there is a library. I made a little generator you can use. Okay, you can read the documentation there, and you can generate a Markdown blog template in Gatsby, Next, Gridsome Nuxt, Sapper, Scully, and there's even a portfolio template for generating portfolios. Okay, so no excuse on that one. Okay, I set it up for you. All you have to do is hit the thing and then just do the design. Okay, but again, the point is you're creating content that's going to help you brand, that's going to help you, and you're creating it in a way that's actually going to also increase your commits, which is also going to help you and your branding. Also, just reaching out, being very active on LinkedIn. I post a lot on LinkedIn. There's, of course, you learn about, like, if you're in a boot camp, you learn a lot about like networking and reaching out to people on LinkedIn, and that's always a good thing. Like, you find someone who does something like works at a company you'd like to work at or does something that you're interested in doing, reach out to them. But do's and don'ts. Don't be like, hey, can I work where you're at? Will you hire me? Okay, I think everyone gets those messages on LinkedIn where basically just people just randomly message you saying, can you hire me? Even though I'm not in a position to hire anyone, people just message you, and that's like the first thing they say to you, like, will you hire me, or will you hire our developers if they're like a group of part of like a group of developers or an agency. No, don't do that. Okay, what you do want to do is you want to strike up a conversation. Ask them, like, do they have bits of advice? Like, say, hey, I would like to work at a company like the company you work for. Can you give me some advice in that regard, or something like that? Strike up a conversation. Be like, hey, I realize you're in the same town. Like, do you know any good ways to, like, expand my network in my local area? Ask a question that doesn't require them, that doesn't put this obligation on them. So basically, hey, if they want to give you more, they'll give you more. Okay, it's not like people that are oblivious that, oh, you're looking for a job, but maybe like, you ask the question, but you don't ask for the thing you really want to ask for, because generally you're asking too much too early in the relationship. Okay, like, I remember, because I used to train a lot of salespeople in the financial industry. I remember this one person who I was training, and this always really, like, stuck with me. He said, like, I never had to sell. Like, he does huge amount of sales, and he says, like, I've never had to ask anyone for a sale, because the way he always got his sales, and again, applying for a job is sales. Like, you're selling yourself. He would build a relationship with people and just be as valuable as he could to them, that he made himself so valuable that people just wanted to do business with him. Okay, basically, like, people were actually, like, weird, like, why isn't he asking me to invest money with him? What did I do? Okay, he created this sort of allure that you can do with when you're being authentic and valuable. Okay, instead of focusing on what people can do for you, you focus on what you can do for people. People are naturally going to kind of want you on their team. Okay, this always reminds me, like, Evan Pagan, who does, like, a lot of, like, business type, motivational type speaking. He talked about, like, liking getting the short end of the stick, and this is also something that stuck with me. Like, just, if you always like, theoretically, giving more, like, trying to give people enough value from their relationship with you, that, like, hey, they're getting $10 of value for every $1 that goes your way. Everyone's gonna want, like, who wouldn't want to pay you $1 if they're getting $10 worth of stuff from you? Okay, so you just have to focus on, like, how can I be as awesome as possible? And why wouldn't you want to be awesome? Okay, isn't it awesome to be awesome? So you have to approach people and ask them a question, but also, again, focus on, like, how can I be of benefit to them? How can I be of value to them? And focus the conversation there. Okay, because if you focus on the conversation there, they're going to want to be of value to you. They're going to want to reciprocate. But if you go in there, what can I take from you? Okay, and you have nothing to give back, there's nothing to reciprocate, and they're not, like, it's not the best social dynamic. So again, you have to be in the giving mindset, not of the taking mindset, and you will receive plenty. Okay, so we don't need to see that. So another really big tip is TripleByte. Okay, TripleByte. Now, TripleByte is a website that does, like, coding tests, and these aren't like tests like coding challenges. These are, like, multiple choice tests about, like, concepts, reading bits of code and saying, hey, what would this code output, terminology, things like that. The great thing about TripleByte is that if you do really well, they actually put you in front row to potential employers, and you'll start, like, I scored really well on the JavaScript. Like, I really spent some time learning JavaScript after my cohort. I still every day, like, spend a lot of time on JavaScript, and JavaScript feels like breathing air at this point. Rust, not so much. I'm trying to get a little bit better with Rust, but that's still, I'm still wrapping my head around certain concepts in there. But although I wouldn't say I'm would say I'm probably better than I'm making it sound right at the moment, because I have spent some time with it. But the point is, like, it basically, I started getting, like, reached out by, like, job offers and whatnot because I scored so well in the exam. But I took a lot of the other exams, and some of them I didn't score as well because they were on topics I don't study as much. But what I did is that when I saw questions I didn't understand as much, because you could take the test again down the road, I wrote down terms. I'm like, oh, okay, I don't know. At the time, I didn't know what what is a graph database and what is an edge and a node. So I wrote that stuff down, and there's certain like terms in Python that I wasn't familiar with, and I wrote those down and I looked them up and learned them. And now talking about like a graph database and what an edge and a node or dictionary comprehension in Python, like now that's just, it's just stuff I know. But this is a good way to get an illustrator of the kind of things that are probably going to be asked you during an interview, and literally this is actually being used by certain employers to assess potential candidates for a job. So you can take the test that you might have to take on the job to get the job ahead of time by just going to the website and taking it for free. So TripleByte, do it. Go with the TripleByte. Cool. Okay, so let's recap. Brand. How? Blogging, podcasting, videos. Okay, videos of you coding, you talking about code, you writing about code, because that's going to make you a better communicator, get you more exposure, and you're going to be better during interviews, and you're going to be more confident during interviews because you've become a good communicator. Okay, constantly expand your knowledge, do regular practices, but take advantage of those practices in the same way you're going to take advantage of your producing of content to create commits on your GitHub. Okay, use TripleByte to kind of gauge sort of maybe where I want to spend my time learning, like what terms do I need to go learn, where are my gaps in my knowledge that might be valuable during an interview. Okay, cool. So those are some of the initial pieces. Now a couple other things you can do. Let me make a new slide. Okay, a couple other things you can do as far as getting experience goes, because that's the other big question, like how do I get experience? Okay, one, volunteer. Just find. There are things like Make It MVP, where I think like potential developers, they can go there. I think they work for free, and they work on actual like projects, like real things, and that are going to be like deployed to get experience until they find a role. Okay, again, that's called Make It MVP. Why not? And there's a few other things like that. Great ways to get experience, but you don't have to like do a pre-existing one. If you just graduated your cohort and you're still, talking to a lot of your fellow students from your cohort, okay, or you have other friends who are like entry-level developers looking for a role, or you can just go on LinkedIn and say, hey, does anybody else want to do this? Start a thing together. Okay, what I mean is like kind of like what Make It MVP does, where they're doing projects for actual people, and the difference here is that you're doing it voluntarily with a group that you decide. So you may choose two or three people. You might go find someone who's an entry-level UX designer and get a couple of the developers and say, hey, find one who specializes in back end, one specializes in front end, and actually like one, either find someone who needs something built for them, like the local restaurant, the local photographer. These are people who are probably not going to pay for someone to build their websites, and they usually have horrible websites. Okay, but they're willing to have someone do it for them for free, and you can do it under a name. Okay, and who knows, maybe in the future they refer you to friends of theirs and they start paying, and you've just built a business for you and your friends. Okay. Also, you could build an app. Okay, you and your friends can build an app. This is genuine experience. You're working in a team, developing code. Okay, but build an app that leverages what you already know. Okay, so one, think about sort of again your previous experiences and things that you're sort of expert on. So like, are you an expert on? Let's say you're an expert on anime. Okay, you know a lot about anime. Maybe think like, if I, as an anime fan, what web application would be useful for me that doesn't exist yet? Okay, that doesn't exist yet. Cool, make that thing. And if anything, do some market research as well. Okay, ask people like, let's say you wanted to, another example, let's say you wanted to build like a app for pet adoption places, or like dog rescues kind of thing, and be like to help them track the dogs that they have for adoption or that have already been adopted, etc. Like create like literally a CMS for dog rescues, let's say. Okay, you'd want to know like, okay, you want to just make a thing and it turns out they don't need that. So you would actually should call rescues and be like, hey, we're planning to produce a piece of software to make your life easier. What would make your life easier? What is it that you need that could be better done if we could automate that process, automate that data? Okay, and come up with an idea. Okay, and build the thing. One, also you're making connections to people who might, because you're networking with these potential like customers down the road, which again you have a reason to have that communication, and that's also of a benefit. Because if you just call them and say, hey, can you pay me to build stuff, they may never talk to you. But whether you're saying, hey, I want to do something for you for free, or we're building something that you might find useful later, that you allow that, create that communication that creates those connections that you can then leverage later. Okay, start a thing with others. Okay, not just by yourself, but with others. Okay, because working in a team is important, and it's an important experience working in a team and doing pull requests and really getting used to those collaboration features on GitHub. So volunteer, start a thing with others. Also, again, I think I've kind of covered almost all the basic pieces of advice that I wanted to share. But again, just to kind of recap where we at the video, we've set expectations of like the investment of time to develop the skills, the investment of time in the job search. Okay, so you basically, you're talking about like 3 to 6 months to develop the skills, and then another 3 to 6 months in job search. Okay, so likely around a year to make the transition successfully. But can you tell me, like, when you think about like sort of the improvement in work-life balance, the increase in income, the intellectual stimulation that you'll have on the job on a regular basis, like, I don't know if you can think of something else where you can do it a year, especially at the reasonable cost that it is. Like, most boot camps are going to be around anywhere between like $10,000 to $20,000 for a course. That's like a semester at college, but you're done. Okay, and on top of it, you have a career coach who's really going to be like in your corner. Okay, so that's pretty awesome. Okay, and you're getting and generally, like, it's not like you get like one instructor who you see once in a while. You're getting a team oftentimes, like the 4 or 5 people who are going to be there on top of like a career coach and other sort of tangential staff that is going to be there to help make sure you're a success. Like, when you really think about like all the people who are going to be there to support you during the program and after the program, $10,000 to $20,000 is a bargain. Okay, and then for the future career you'll have, yeah, okay. But again, there's different paths. Like, you could go get the 4-year degree. You could teach yourself. These are all legit paths. They have different expectations of how long things are going to take. Again, hopefully I set those expectations clearly at the beginning. But again, there's all sorts of things you can do to better brand yourself, become a better communicator, develop your passion, your knowledge, okay, and network. Go out and reach out to people, develop your knowledge, be the best you can be. Bottom line is you gotta not necessarily, if you focus too much on getting the job, you're going to hold yourself back because you're not focusing on things that make you more valuable. It's the things that make you more valuable that'll help you get the job. Look for a job, yes. Okay, you got to do the search, because if you're not doing the search, if you're not reaching out to people, making those connections, applying for jobs, doing those interviews to get that practice. Okay, but again, you're going to get a lot of practice communicating through the writing of blogs, doing the podcasting, doing the videos. And again, it doesn't matter if anyone listens or ever watches those things. Okay, what matters is that you do them for the experience of doing them. But hey, if you become like the next big podcaster, why not? So yes, I think that's the advice. I'll put all the relative links in the video description. I hope you guys find this useful. If you do find it useful, share the video, like the video, subscribe to the channel, because I also do a lot of live streams where I do code challenges. So if you want to actually watch me do code challenges live and watch me scratch my head and Google things and kind of see that, hey, like, doesn't matter how long you do this, you got to sometimes just Google how to do something with a string. Subscribe to the channel, watch the live streams. Also, I come out with a lot of content. I have a video coming out every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. on some sort of topic. Okay, so literally anything you'd want to learn, there's probably a video on it. And if you head over to resources.alexmercedcoder.com, here you can find once it loads, a pretty decent directory of a lot of my content, written and video, on pretty much anything you'd want to learn. Okay, so let me make that journey a little bit easier for you. Okay, I've been spending a lot of time organizing this stuff and putting it in digestible chunks, so that way it's easier for you to learn and pick up whatever technology you want to pick up. So do leverage that. And then also join the Dev Nursery Slack community. Okay, well, let me just bring it up over here. Okay, so this is like the Dev Nursery Slack community. Okay, and in here what you can do is I created a channel called Learn More. Okay, and in the Learn More channel, I'm going to be doing a tutorial of the week. Think of this as like a book club. Okay, the idea here is this: like oftentimes after boot camp, you kind of lose that mojo, that momentum, because you don't have that camaraderie, that shared sort of mission that you do during the cohort. So the idea here is by by highlighting one tutorial every week, everyone works on the same thing. Everyone can help each other working on the same thing. You can feel like that camaraderie again as you guys share the results of your work, ask each other questions. This is sort of like I just started it this week, so I don't know when you're gonna watch this, but hopefully like at some point. So yeah, so join that. If you go to dev.nursery.com, I also have a version of it on the Discord as well. All you have to do is just go to dev.nursery.com and just join the Slack or Discord community. Okay, and you can meet other devs and all that good stuff. Again, here's a fun list of different technologies. Not all of them, but plenty of them. Some fun cheat sheets that I've made on different languages. So there's a lot of good, useful stuff there. Okay, so that's what I have to share with you. Hopefully you find this useful. My name is Alex Merced. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn. Reach out to me anytime you want. I'm always glad to answer questions. And if you're considering a boot camp, head over to GA and look at the schedule and see if you find a class being taught by me. I would love to have you in my class. Okay. Yeah, I like sharing knowledge. I'm passionate about the technology, and I'm passionate about getting other people excited about technology, because it can do so many amazing things, not just to empower us as, hey, look, we got this job and now we're doing better, but also to empower others and far as the things they can do with their technologies and the improvement in their lives with the technology. Like the power we have to change the world around us with these skills is amazing, and I want to empower people to use it and to thrive on it. So my name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day and enjoy.